A Quiet Place Day 1 is dropped in theaters, so let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Let me know, what did you think about A Quiet Place Day 1? As for me, I went into this movie very excited. This was one of my most anticipated films of the year for several different reasons. First off, I very much enjoyed the first two films in the franchise, and I felt like this was a series that lent itself to spin-offs. The first two movies are about this big gigantic invasion, but the story itself is about just this one family trying to survive, and immediately your mind goes, what happened elsewhere? And that's the story, or one of the stories, that this movie is telling. The other thing I was excited about is that this film was directed by the director of the movie Pig, a movie that I loved from a couple years back, and seeing kind of this kind of artistic, kind of quirky director tackling a big franchise, I was just curious what he was going to do with it. Now I've seen the movie, and let's get started with the good, and I'll cut right to the chase. I thoroughly enjoyed this film for the reasons that I was excited for the film. That I feel like this is a franchise where you can take the basic concept of this invasion and put it in a bunch of different environments, and each of them will have something fresh, new, and different to offer while still having that same experience that you want. And that's what this movie did so well. It is very much in A Quiet Place film where you have people trying to remain silent in this very intense situation, but it puts it in an entirely new environment. First two movies, kind of in this small town, lots of woods, not a lot of people around. So how do you do something that's wildly different? You set it in New York City. About as opposite of an environment as you can get, both in terms of population density, the types of items around you which would cause noise, the ways you might escape. And so you're able to do what a good sequel or spinoff is supposed to do, which is offer more of the same, but make sure that it's still different. That's what this movie does. So on that point, this movie's able to do certain things which are just much larger in scale and terrifying in a new way than what we saw in the first two films, where there's sequences where you're on the streets of New York City, packed shoulder to shoulder, knowing someone's going to screw up. There's going to be noise. And when that happens, utter chaos is going to unfold, and there will be a huge number of casualties. All sorts of things of when you're in an urban environment, you have different floors to buildings. You have a much more variety of types of buildings. You have subways. And it plays into that very much so, to just keep offering new ways to create scenarios where someone needs to get from point A to point B without making any noise. But unfortunately, there's this item in the way. The other big important piece here is that you have the scenario of keeping quiet, but then there's also the characters that you're connecting with. And the first two movies, of course, are about this one family. And this movie very wisely kind of goes in the opposite direction, which provides very different characters as well as a totally different emotional hook. The first two movies are about this one family trying to maintain the connections that already exist. In this movie, we're really looking at two people that are all alone, that find connection in the middle of all this chaos, which has a very different vibe to it, because you're seeing a friendship form, a deep connection form in a very short period of time because of that longing inside of all of us to connect. And so it's in the same category as the first two movies. That longing for other people, the value of life and wanting to help. As dark as these movies can be, there's a certain hopefulness inside of them, in particular, part two in this film. But it's all fresh and new and different. And there's just something very beautiful about the way that this friendship forms in this environment, in this context, and what they mean to each other after just so little time has passed, but so much life has happened. And so once again, it delivers the A Quiet Place experience, but it does it in a new way because of the environment, the characters, and the emotional hook to it. Now, our two leads here, I thought, just did a really good job. Now, Lupita Nyong'o has been around showing up in blockbusters and smaller films and getting acclaim for 10 years now. Joseph Quinn, and when, of course, she's very good in this movie as well. Joseph Quinn is kind of our new up-and-comer, where he was this breakout side character from Stranger Things 4 that people absolutely fell in love with. And every casting director in Hollywood noticed how did a side character in season 4 of a show become one of the most beloved characters? This guy has something. And I think you see that very much in this movie, that he's just able to make you care about him and feel a lot without needing a lot of words or a lot of screen time. He's able to emote in a way that connects with people. And that's exactly what you need in a movie like this. And then once again, when you put that in with Lupita Nyong'o, who also has a lot of those same qualities, and what she was able to do in like a movie like Us with her face, you have to be able to do that in a film like this, where the dialogue is so limited, but I need to understand what you're feeling and what you care about. And they found two people that can pull that off. The other good thing about this film, or other thing that I think made this movie work, is that in a lot of ways, it's a much more artful film. I referenced at the beginning, it was directed by the guy that did the movie Pig, which is like a small indie film that it's not an obvious movie that would be your stepping stone to get to make a movie like this, but you can see where some of the director's tendencies found their way into A Quiet Place. So you're in the middle of this chaotic situation. It's all about edge of your seat thrills, the destruction of our way of life. And it pauses to have all these reflective moments, whether visually or character moments, to just see life happen. Where, without wanting to go into too much about what's going on with Lupita Nyong'o's character, I didn't know going into the movie, so I don't want to say it here, but there's like, she's going into the apocalypse at a very specific moment in her life. And great storytelling, great arcs. You find the right character that needs this to happen to them, to work through something. So even in the first A Quiet Place, to work through the trauma of the opening scene of that movie, you needed to go through that adventure to mend the relationship in the family, for the daughter to understand how much she really meant to the dad. And then even with Oppenheimer's character in the second film, Cillian Murphy, he needed that adventure to become the person that he needed to be. And here, it's a totally different arc about this very specific moment in her life. And the apocalypse is what she needed in a lot of ways to live life just a little bit more. And the director finds all these moments to just pause and reflect on what that means for her in these moments. And it can be like profound with very simple, small things happening. And whether the music cues, the choice of shots, the lingering on the little moments of beauty in all the chaos, it just has a very specific artful flair to kind of everything unfolding. So for me, this movie delivered almost everything that I wanted it to deliver. I got the A Quiet Place experience with great edge of your seat thrills, but also characters that I cared about, while doing it in a new way with its own flavor, its own vibe. It doesn't feel like Pig director is trying to copy what John Krasinski did with the first two movies. No, it's allowed to have its own vibe and style to it, but still gives you everything, or almost everything, that I wanted from it. So I think that this is a great spinoff, but there were a few things I think could have been a little bit better. Real quick before I move on to the bad, one question a lot of people have already asked me: can this movie work as an on-ramp for the franchise, or do you need to watch the first two films before watching day one? I think that this is a perfectly fine on-ramp for the franchise, because it is a story told completely separate from the other two movies. There is a character that overlaps between the two of them, but not in a way that it would spoil anything, in which case the order matters, in which case you see it. You can start with this film. You'll be perfectly fine. If you're interested, go see the film. With that said, let's move on to the bad. Since I thoroughly enjoyed the movie, I don't have a whole lot to say here. First thing that comes to mind, it's more an omission rather than criticizing something that is in the movie. But I feel the movie would have been better if it had given us a little bit more on the aliens or the grander lore and mythos of everything going on. We're 3 movies in, and we haven't expanded our knowledge of the aliens, the creatures, in any significant sense. And this movie is once again a case of that. We get another thrilling, edge-of-your-seat survival film, but at a certain point you want at least a little bit more information. I don't need every question answered. I don't need to remove all intrigue. I sometimes less is more, but also sometimes you need to give a little bit more if you're going to keep telling stories, and so I feel that was a missed opportunity. There is a sequence in the movie that reveals a little bit more about the creatures, but nothing that's particularly profound. I talked to someone that actually went to a test screening of the movie, and they cut a little bit out of the film where it actually showed what the aliens were doing with the people when they grabbed them. And it gave a little bit more lore, but apparently the feedback in those meetings was it was confusing. It wasn't clear what was happening. And so they ended up cutting that out of the theatrically released version of the film. So you just kind of get this one sequence where you see a little bit of what the aliens are doing, but nothing particularly interesting or insightful. I think that was a missed opportunity. And I think the other one, I don't think the thrills are as effective in this movie. One of the things I think the Krasinski films just did so well is like introducing small little details that you pay attention to it. A nail on the ground, or you see batteries and you have this sense of dread for what's coming. And it does a really good job of foreshadowing what's coming, showing us the thing in advance and putting you on your edge of your seat before the characters even know that they're in danger. And this movie, because the characters move further, they're in more environments, it's not just not as effective at doing that. Likewise, children in peril, a woman giving birth, those are just such vulnerable people or vulnerable states for a person that it's more powerful than 2 full-grown adults running from something. And so they just played better in the first 2 movies. But this movie delivered what I wanted it to deliver. I got a quiet place experience in a new location with new characters that I cared about in a different, fresh, new emotional hook. It's not quite as effective as the first 2 for me, but still a very good horror thriller, and I'm excited to see more movies in this world. Overall, it's a B+ on the entertainment scale and 8 out of 10, and you should see this one in the theater, preferably with a very full crowd. These movies play great with an audience. The bigger the audience, the better, because that the use of sound is so pivotal that when you're in a room full of people and they're eating popcorn and everyone's being quiet and you hear even that creates extra tension in the room. So if you like the first 2 movies, highly recommend you go see this movie as quick as you can with as full of a theater as you can to have the best possible experience watching this film. I'm going to come back this weekend with my ranking of all 3 films in the A Quiet Place franchise. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies and TV to